The knife sliced through the apple pie with a sickening squelch. But it was the silence that cut deepest. 20 pairs of eyes locked on Chris as the blade hovered mid-air, cherry filling oozing like blood onto the checkered tablecloth. "You're not family," Aunt Marlene hissed from across the reunion table, her voice a venomous whisper that echoed louder than the cicadas in the Georgia heat. "So why pretend?" Chris's hand trembled, the knife clattering to the plate, and in that frozen heartbeat, he saw it. Every faded snapshot on the mantel back home, his face cropped out like a ghost erased from the frame. He'd driven 12 hours from Atlanta, the humid air thick with regret, just to sit here under the sagging oaks of his childhood backyard, pretending the past decade hadn't carved canyons between him and the kin who'd raised him. The Whitaker family reunion was a ritual as old as the pecan trees. Red solo cups raised to toasts about bloodlines thicker than molasses, laughter bubbling over stories of football games and church potlucks. But Chris, at 32, with his ink-sleeved arms and the faint scar from a bar fight in 18, felt like an exhibit in a museum of what-ifs. His brother Tom's arms slung casual around his wife's shoulders, cousins snapping selfies with filters that smoothed out the ugly truths. And Harry, God, Harry, sitting beside him like a shield, his boyfriend's calloused hand hidden under the table, fingers laced tight in a grip that said, "I'm here, but for how long?" It started with the photos, as these things always did. Grandma Ellie, perched at the head like a queen on her aluminum folding chair, had pulled out the old albums after lunch, the ones with yellowed edges and captions in her looping cursive. Whitaker clan, summer 92. Chris remembered posing for them as a kid, all gap-toothed grins and sunburned knees. But now, flipping through, his adult self was absent. Not a single shot from Thanksgiving 15, when he'd come out over turkey and tension. Nada from the wedding he'd skipped because Tom had begged him to tone it down for the guests. "Where's the rest of us?" Chris had joked earlier, voice light as spun sugar, but Ellie's smile had faltered, her arthritic fingers snapping the book shut like a trap. "Family's what we make it, sugar. Blood tells." Harry had squeezed his thigh then, a silent fuck them. His blue eyes, those damn ocean blue eyes that had pulled Chris from the wreckage of his 20s, flashing with the fire of a man who'd grown up in trailer parks and knew rejection like an old scar. They'd met 3 years back at a dive bar in Midtown, Harry nursing a Bud Light after a double shift at the auto shop, Chris drowning sorrows in whiskey sours post-breakup. One shared glance over the jukebox, Springsteen crooning about Thunder Roads, and it was electric, hands brushing in the dim light, lips meeting in the alley out back, tasting of smoke and salt. Harry, with his broad shoulders and laugh like gravel under tires, had been Chris's anchor ever since. But anchors could drag you under, too. As the afternoon dragged into golden hour, the air hummed with forced cheer, Uncle Ray grilling burgers with stories of his glory days at the mill, Aunt Marlene passing deviled eggs while side-eyeing Harry's tattoo peeking from his sleeve. Chris nursed a lukewarm beer, the condensation dripping like sweat down the bottle, his mind replaying the drive down I-85. Harry's hand on his knee at a rest stop, murmuring, "You sure about this? We could bail. Head to the beach instead." But Chris had shaken his head, stubborn as the red clay underfoot. "I need to face it. For us." That word hung heavy now, as Tom clapped him on the back a little too hard, slurring, "Good to see you, bro. Brought the friend." Ha! The emphasis on friend landed like a sucker punch, and Harry's jaw clenched, his fork scraping the plate like nails on chalkboard. By dusk, the fireflies were out, winking like conspirators in the gathering dark. And the family had migrated to the porch for s'mores and tall tales. Chris slipped away to the old shed, the one where he'd hidden comic books and first kisses as a teen, stolen moments with boys from the neighborhood that he'd buried deeper than the time capsule under the oak. He rummaged through dusty boxes, heart pounding, until his fingers closed on it, the album. Not the sanitized Whitaker one, but his, a battered leather thing he'd started in college. Pages stuffed with Polaroids and prints from a life they refused to see. Harry found him there, silhouetted against the lantern light, and wrapped arms around his waist from behind. "You okay, babe?" Chris leaned back, inhaling the familiar scent of motor oil and Irish Spring. "Just remembering." He flipped open the album, the first page a faded shot of him and Tom as kids, arms slung around each other at the county fair, cotton candy staining their grins. But deeper in him at 22, laughing in a dorm room with his first boyfriend, eyes bright with possibility. A blurry night in San Francisco, rainbow flags whipping in the wind during Pride. And there, tucked in the back pocket, the one that twisted the knife, Harry and him on a rainy afternoon in Savannah, foreheads pressed together on a park bench, rain blurring the edges like tears. "They cropped me out," Chris whispered, voice cracking. Every damn time, Harry's breath hitched, his stubble grazing Chris's neck. "Then show him the uncut version." It was half joke, half dare. But in the humid dark, it ignited something feral in Chris, a spark of the boy who'd once dreamed of Broadway lights instead of mill shifts, who'd chosen love over legacy. Back on the porch, the group had swelled with neighbors, laughter sloshing like cheap wine, but Chris carried the album like a grenade. He cleared his throat, the sound slicing through the chatter, and every head turned. Ellie with her shrewd squint, Marlene with lips pursed like lemons. "Before we wrap up," Chris said, voice steady as a preacher's, "I brought something." The Real Family album. He slapped it down on the wicker table, pages fanning open under the bug zapper's blue hum. Gasps rippled out. First Tom's low whistle, then Marlene's sharp intake. There it was, the hypocrisy laid bare. A shot of Uncle Ray in 78, arm around a buddy from Nam, their embrace too tender for just friends. Ellie's hidden letters to a boarding school sweetheart, postmarked from a time when love like that was whispered in shadows. Even Tom, blurry in a high school yearbook, labeled Best Bromance with a wrestler who'd vanished after graduation, rumors swirling like smoke. The silence stretched, taut as a bowstring, until Marlene shattered it. "This is filth, lies to drag us down," but her eyes darted to Ray, who stared at his boots, face ashen. Harry stood then, hand on Chris's shoulder, his voice a low rumble. "It's truth, ma'am. The kind you'll been airbrushing out." Chaos erupted, cousins murmuring, plates clattering as folks shifted like tectonic plates. Tom grabbed Chris's arm, hissing, "What the hell? Man, you planned this." Betrayal burned in his eyes, but Chris saw the fear beneath, the mirror of his own. All those years ago. As shouts overlapped, Ellie rose slow, her cane tapping like a gavel. She hobbled to the album, tracing a finger over the Pride photo, her wrinkled hand trembling. "Christopher," she murmured, using his full name like a prayer. "You kept all this?" He nodded, throat tight, and in her gaze, he saw not anger, but a fracture, the old woman's armor cracking to reveal the girl who'd loved fiercely and lost quietly. We didn't know how," she admitted, voice a whisper lost in the fray. Harry pulled Chris close, their bodies a bulwark against the storm, and for the first time, Chris felt seen, not cropped, not erased, but etched in indelible ink. But the night wasn't done unraveling. As the crowd thinned, Marlene cornered Harry by the cooler, her face twisted in the porch light. "You poisoned him against us," she spat, voice laced with the South's righteous fury. Harry, ever the hothead, leaned in, eyes like flint. "Lady, your poison's been festering longer than you've admitted," she recoiled, but not before Tom overheard, his face crumpling as he pieced together the whispers about their dad, the one who'd gone fishing one weekend and never came back the same. The betrayal hit then, not just Chris's exclusion, but the family's collective silence. A web of omissions spun from shame. Chris watched from the steps, the album heavy in his lap, as Harry stormed off toward the truck, tires kicking gravel in his wake. "Wait," Chris called, chasing him into the dark, the reunion's lights fading like a bad dream. They argued under the stars, Harry's voice breaking on "I can't keep fighting your ghosts," Chris's pleas tangled with "this is our fight now." Lips crashed in fury and forgiveness, hands fumbling with belt buckles against the truck's warm hood, the Georgia night swallowing their gasps. It was raw, reclaiming love as rebellion, bodies mapping the terrain they'd lost to fear. Dawn broke sticky and unforgiving, the backyard littered with solo cups like confetti from a funeral. Chris woke in the guest room bed, Harry's side cold, a note scrawled on motel stationery, "Needed air. Call me." Panic clawed his chest as he dressed, the album tucked under his arm like a talisman. Downstairs, Ellie waited with coffee, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. "Heard the ruckus last night," she said, pushing a mug his way. "Family's messy, boy. But blood, the bends, don't break." Tom appeared then, hungover and hollow, sliding into the booth across from them. "About Dad," he started, voice gravel. "The letters. You weren't wrong." The confession spilled out, how their father had loved a man once, buried it under mill work and Methodist guilt, died with the secret eating him hollow. Betrayal layered on betrayal, but in the telling, something shifted. Tom's hand on Chris's, tentative bridge over the chasm. "I was scared, man, of losing you both ways." By noon, the house emptied, relatives scattering like leaves in a gust, but not before hugs. Awkward, tear-streaked, from cousins who'd lingered, whispering apologies. Marlene drove off without a word, her Buick kicking dust, but Ray lingered, clapping Harry's shoulder on his return. Awkward nod to the friend now undeniably more. Harry, bleary from a sleepless drive to the coast and back, pulled Chris aside in the barn, their foreheads touching like that rainy photo. "I almost left," he admitted, voice rough. "Thought I was the outsider here." "You're the only real thing," Chris replied, kissing the salt from his lashes. They packed the truck slow, the album now shared on the dash, pages turning to futures unshot. As they pulled onto the highway, Georgia fading in the rearview, Chris glanced back one last time, the Whitaker signpost crooked but standing. Family wasn't the frames they'd cropped. It was the album they'd finally opened, raw edges and all. The asphalt unspooled under the tires like a ribbon of regret. I-85 cutting north through pine thickets and billboards hawking Jesus Saves and Waffle House. Chris gripped the wheel, knuckles white as bone, Harry's playlist humming low, Bon Iver's falsetto weaving through the vents like smoke from a dying fire. "Pull over," Harry said after an hour, voice thick with unshed somethings. They found a scenic overlook, the Chattahoochee River glinting below like shattered glass. And there, against the guardrail, Harry broke, shoulders shaking, fists balled in his flannel. "I hate them for what they did to you. But mostly, I hate me for dragging you through it." Chris pulled him close, the wind whipping their shirts like flags of truce. "You didn't drag. You carried." Their kiss was salt and solace, hands roaming familiar paths, but underneath pulsed the unspoken. The reunion had cracked them open, exposing fault lines neither had mapped. Back on the road, conversation flowed halting, Harry recounting his own ghosts, the stepdad who'd called him fairy boy before the beatings, the mom who'd chosen silence over son. "Thought Atlanta was escape," Harry said, staring at passing semis. "Turns out, it's just another cage if we let it be." They hit the city by dusk, the skyline jagged against a bruise-purple sky, traffic snarling like old grudges. Chris's apartment in Grant Park was a third-floor walk-up, walls papered in band posters and Polaroids, their life in snapshots, uncropped and unapologetic. Dropping the duffel, Harry beelined for the fridge, cracking beers with a ritual pop. "To surviving Whitakers," he toasted, clinking bottles, but his eyes held storm clouds. That night, tangled in sheets worn soft from too many washes, love-making was urgent, fingers digging bruises, gasps swallowed in the dark. Afterward, Harry traced the tattoo on Chris's ribcage, a compass rose inked after their first road trip, and murmured, "Where to next, Captain?" Work waited like a guillotine. Chris at the graphic design firm in Midtown, pixels and deadlines blurring his vision. Harry under hoods at the shop, grease black as doubt under his nails. A week blurred by in routine coffee runs, take-out tie on the fire escape, but the album haunted, propped on the bookshelf like a dare. Chris flipped through it one lunch hour, alone in the loft light, and found a loose photo, him and Harry at Bonnaroo 21, mud-caked and euphoric, arms thrown wide under stage lights. Tucked behind was something new, a printout, Tom's handwriting shaky. "Sorry doesn't fix it, but it's a start. Come for Labor Day? Bring the truth." Heart stuttered. Chris texted Harry a pic, thumbs hovering before redemption arc. Harry's reply buzzed instant, "Only if it's got pie." But beneath the quip, a thread of hope. They talked it out over burgers at the Majestic, vinyl booths cradling their elbows, the diner's neon buzzing like fireflies. "What if it's a trap?" Harry voiced the fear, ketchup smudged on his lip. Chris wiped it with a napkin, lingering. "Then we walk. Together." The decision settled like dew. Cool and inevitable, Labor Day in Georgia. Round 2. But life, that cruel editor, had other cuts in mind. It started small. A client at Chris's firm, Derek, slick-haired creative director with a jawline like a Marvel hero, lingering too long over mock-ups, compliments laced with double entendre. "You've got an eye, Whitaker. And those arms? Killer." Chris laughed it off, but the glances piled up. Derek's knee brushing his under conference tables. Invites to network at rooftop bars. Harry noticed, of course, nostrils flaring over dinner one night. "Who's the suit?" he'd ask, casual as a loaded gun. "Just work," Chris deflected, guilt gnawing like termites. But Derek was easy validation without the weight. A flirtation that felt like air after the reunion suffocation. Then betrayal bloomed ugly. Late September. Harry working overtime on a custom Mustang. Chris caved. Drinks with Derek at a speakeasy in East Atlanta Village. Bourbon burning smooth as lies. One touch led to 2 fingers on thigh. Lips grazing ear. And suddenly they were in a cab. Derek's hotel room a blur of silk sheets and regret. Morning light stabbed like accusations. Chris bolting with pants in hand. Derek sleepy, call me? Echoing hollow. He drove home puking into a Whataburger bag. The album's spine mocking from the passenger seat. Harry was there. Sprawled on the couch with a beer. Eyes sharpening on Chris's disheveled state. Rough night. The lie stuck in Chris's craw. But it tumbled out anyway, half-truths about deadlines. Omitting the rest. Harry nodded. But the air soured. Trust fraying like old denim. Days stretched taut. Harry's silences at breakfast. Chris's overcompensating jokes. The album became a third wheel. Gathering dust as Labor Day loomed. Finally, over takeout lo mein, Harry cracked it open himself, flipping to the Savannah photo. This us? Real? Chris nodded, throat dry. Always, but Harry's gaze pierced, seeing the shadows Chris hid. Then why you pulling away? Confession erupted like a fault line. The Derek slip, born of insecurity, the fear that family rejection had scarred him irreparably. Harry listened, face stone, then stood, jacket in hand. I need space, man, to figure if this is salvageable. The door clicked shut soft as a guillotine, leaving Chris in the echo. He curled on the floor, album clutched like a lifeline, pages blurring through tears. Betrayal wasn't just the family's erasures. It was his own, carving Harry out of safety for a moment's numbness. Weeks bled into autumn, leaves carpeting the streets in crimson regret. Chris threw himself into work, designs sharper with pain's edge, but Derek's emails pinged like accusations. Missed you last week. Round 2, deleted, blocked, buried. Harry went radio silent, then sparse, shop's crazy. You good? Chris's replies begged without begging. The album's photos taunting ghosts of what they'd built. Tom's texts bridged the gap. Mom's asking. You coming? Harry too? Ellie called once. Voice frail over static. Bring him. Sugar. We've got rooms to fill. Labor Day dawned fever hot. Chris loading the truck solo. Album riding shotgun like a co-pilot. He drove south alone. Harry's absence a hollow in the passenger seat. Radio static his only companion. The Whitaker farm looked softer in harvest light. Silos gilded, but tension hummed like power lines. Tom met him at the gate. Bear hug fierce. Glad you made it. Where's the other half? Chris shrugged. Evasive. And inside, Ellie pressed pie into his hands. Eyes searching. He'll come round, she said, as if reading tea leaves. The reunion swelled. More kin than July. Laughter louder to mask the scars. That night, fire pit crackling under a quilt of stars. Chris nursed a s'more, the chocolate bitter on his tongue. Marlene hovered peripheral, her frost thawed to wary nods. But it was Ray who sat beside him, passing a flask of bourbon. Saw your album last time, the uncle rumbled, firelight dancing on his lined face. Brought mine. He pulled a slim binder from his truck. Pages crackling with yellowed news clips. Obits for lovers lost to AIDS in the 80s. Pride March photos smudged but defiant. Kept it locked. Till you. The sharing was seismic. Two men trading silences broken. Ray's hand on Chris's knee, brief but brotherly. But the real quake hit Sunday. As games wound down, cornhole tosses and kitty races giving way to goodbyes. Harry's truck rumbled up the drive, dust clouding like a storm front, and Chris's heart seized. He stepped out, album under arm. As Harry unfolded, tired eyes, flannel rumpled. Drove straight through, Harry said. No preamble. Couldn't not. They collided halfway across the lawn. Embrace fierce. Kin pausing mid-convo to stare. Tom whooped, breaking tension, and Ellie beckoned them to the porch. There, under the swings creak, Chris opened the album, not just his, but augmented. New prints slotted in, Harry's handwriting captioning a shot from their first date. Scrawled the uncropped us. Forgive me, Chris whispered, voice threadbare. Harry's nod was slow, thumb brushing his jaw. Only if you do. The kiss that followed was public. Unhurried. Lips soft. Hands framing faces. The family a blurred audience. Gasps. Then claps. Marlene turned away, but Ellie smiled. Tears carving tracks. As dusk deepened, the album passed hand to hand. Ray adding his clips. Tom slipping in a photo of their dad. Young and laughing with a mystery man at the lake. Secrets aired like laundry, the air lighter for it. Harry leaned into Chris, murmuring, "This your happy ending?" Chris glanced at the gathering, flawed, fractured, but framing them whole. "Ours," he replied, and in that word, redemption bloomed, humanistic and hard-won. Fall deepened into a watercolor blur. Atlanta streets slick with rain that mirrored the slow mend in Chris and Harry's rhythm. They rebuilt deliberate date nights at the High Museum, wandering impressionist galleries hand in shadow. Harry's thumb tracing Monet lilies on Chris's palm. Lazy Sundays wrenching on the truck in the alley. Grease-smeared kisses tasting of possibility. The album lived on the coffee table now. No longer relic but reference. Pages dog-eared from late-night perusals. Harry's additions multiplying. A ticket stub from a drag brunch glued beside a selfie of them in feather boas. Captioned Queens of the South. But peace, that fickle lover, had a habit of ghosting. October brought Derek's ghost. Not the man, but the echo. A forwarded email from HR landing in Chris's inbox like a grenade. Complaint filed inappropriate conduct. Meeting required. Turns out, Derek hadn't taken rejection quiet. Whispers to colleagues about the Whitaker guy's advances. A fabricated trail of texts from a burner app. Chris's stomach plummeted. The office suddenly a coliseum. Co-workers' glances sharpening. His pitch for the holiday campaign stumbling over silences. He confessed to Harry that night over ramen at home. Steam curling like question marks. "It's bullshit," Harry growled. Chopsticks snapping in his fist. "Fight it." The meeting was a tribunal. Derek across the table. Suit crisp as lies. His smile a scalpel. Chris laid it bare, the flirtation mutual. The slip his alone. No coercion. HR nodded neutral. But the damage seeped. Sidelined projects. Watercooler murmurs like acid rain. Nights. Chris paced the loft. Album open to the Bonnaroo shot. Envying that muddy joy. Harry anchored him, arms like rebar. Voice a steady drone of "you're enough." But doubt festered. Betrayal's aftertaste souring their bed. Chris woke sweating from dreams of empty frames. Harry's face the next to fade. Mid-November, salvation slithered in sly. A whistleblower email. Anonymous. Forwarding Derek's history. Similar complaints from past firms. A pattern of predatory pivots. HR pivoted too. Derek relieved of duties. Chris cleared with a mealy apology. Relief flooded, but so did rage. Chris channeling it into ink. Sketching a zine of cropped photos reclaimed. Vignettes of queer erasure in corporate gloss. He printed copies at Kinko's, stapled raw, and left them in break rooms. A quiet insurgency. Harry proofed the final draft over beers on the fire escape, his laugh rumbling approval. This you, babe. Uncut. Thanksgiving loomed like a specter, but this year, they flipped the script, no Whitaker Drive, but a chosen family feast at a friend's Inman Park brownstone. The table groaned under turducken and queer icons, drag queens in Yuletide drag, trans activists trading manifestos over pie. Harry carved the bird with flourish, toasting to frames we fill ourselves, and Chris's chest swelled, love a tide pulling him under sweet. Later, in the host's guest room, bodies entwined slow, exploring scars like maps, Harry's mouth mapping devotion on collarbones, Chris's fingers spelling stay in Morse on his back. Dawn found them tangled, albums slipped into the suitcase for the road home, portable hearth. Winter bit early, Atlanta's rare frost-limming windows in lace, but warmth brewed in plans. A New Year's escape to Asheville, Blue Ridge cabins and hot springs to soak out the year's grit. They booked it over eggnog at Manuel's Tavern, Harry's boot nudging Chris's under the bar. Just us, he said, eyes crinkling. No ghosts, but ghosts had long arms. Tom's call came Christmas Eve, voice tinny over holiday clamor. Mom's fading, Chris. Doc say months. Maybe. Wants you here. Both of you. Ellie, the matriarch who'd cracked first, now bedbound in the farmhouse. Her cough a rattle like loose change in a tin. The drive south was a vigil, wipers slapping rhythm against sleet, Harry's hand a constant on Chris's thigh. The farm was hushed, holiday lights twinkling defiant against the chill, Marlene in the kitchen stirring gumbo with mechanical grace. Ellie lay propped in the parlor, skin translucent as onion skin paper, but her eyes sparked on sight. My boys, she rasped, beckoning. Chris knelt, album in hand, Harry's presence a solid warmth at his back. She traced the pages slow, the pride shot drawing a wheeze laugh, Ray's clips earning a nod. Knew about your uncle, she confessed, voice papery. Loved him still. Like I'll love you, always. Tears tracked. But so did stories, Ellie spilling her own. A summer 59 in Charleston. Stolen dances with a debutante whose family shipped her north. Letters burned in a fit of propriety. Cropped myself out, she admitted, hand frail on Chris's. Don't you dare. Harry squeezed her other. The three of them a tableau, generations bridged in vulnerability. Marlene hovered doorway, face warring, until Ellie crooked a finger. Come, sister. See the full picture. Reluctant, she perched, eyes widening at a faded tintype. Great aunties in Gibson girl gowns, arms linked too intimate for Ira's gaze. The room softened, confessions cascading, Marlene's college crush on a sorority sister, silenced by shotgun wedding. Christmas morning dawned brittle, but the parlor brimmed. Kin gathered round Ellie's bed, album open like a Bible, voices overlapping in revelation. Tom read aloud from Dad's letters, Harry's arm slung casual over Chris's shoulders. The pose captured in a cousin's phone snap, no cropping this time. Ellie passed by Epiphany, slipping quiet as snow. Her last words to Chris a murmur. Frame it all, sugar. The beautiful mess. The funeral was a week later. Baptist chapel packed. Eulogies laced with unspoken grace. Marlene spoke last. Voice steady. She taught us family ain't perfect. It's persistent. Afterward, at the graveside, Ray pressed a key into Harry's palm, the old truck spare. You're in now. Spring unfurled tentative. Dogwoods blushing Atlanta's avenues. Chris and Harry wading through grief's sludge toward bloom. Chris's zine went viral in queer circles, shared on Tumblr threads, featured in a local mag, spurring workshops at the shop. Harry facilitating with grease-stained hands, stories flowing like oil. One night, post-session, a kid no older than 20 lingered. Eyes haunted. They crop me too, he whispered. Chris slid him the album copy. Harry's arm a shield. Then make your own. By summer, the anniversary of that first reunion circled like a hawk. They returned, not obligation, but choice, the backyard reborn with fairy lights and a barbecue pit roaring. Tom manned the grill, wife flipping burgers, kids chasing fireflies with nets. Marlene arrived with cobbler, her hug for Chris stiff but sincere. Ray with his binder, now merged with theirs in a communal tome. As dusk painted the oak's umber, Harry raised a cup, voice carrying, to the uncropped. Cheers rippled. Phones out, not for selfies, but candids. Chris laughing with nieces, Harry tossing a boy skyward, the album open on the picnic table like an invitation. Later, under the stars, Chris and Harry slipped to the shed, the air thick with honeysuckle and memory. Think she'd approve? Chris asked, nodding toward the house. Harry's grin flashed white. Hell, she'd demand encores. Their lovemaking was unhurried, backs against weathered wood, breaths sinking like heartbeats, the night a canopy over their reclamation. In the afterglow, album between them, Chris added a fresh print, Tonight's Chaos, faces full-framed, love etched in every line. The story didn't end there. Life's no neat bind, but in that Georgia dark, with Harry's head on his chest, Chris felt the weight lift. They'd been left out once, betrayed by blades and silences, but now they were the album, pages turning toward light. Summer's swelter clung like a second skin, Atlanta pulsing with festivals and firework haze. But for Chris and Harry, the heat wave was internal, a slow burn of rediscovery after the winter's call. Ellie's passing had been a pivot, grief the forge tempering their edges sharper, sweeter. They dove into routines reborn, weekend hikes in the Chattahoochee National Forest, packs heavy with PB and JS and the album for impromptu picnics. Harry's shop expanding to custom queer pride wraps, rainbow lowriders gleaming in the lot, drawing clients who lingered for shop talk turned therapy. Chris's designs bloomed bolder, landing a gig with Outright, the city's lit fest, posters of fractured frames reassembled, taglines see the whole story. Yet conflict simmered subtle, betrayal's embers flaring in quiet moments. Harry's ex, Jake, a drifter mechanic from his Knoxville days, rolled into town mid-July, horn blaring outside the shop like a bad omen. Tall, lanky with a wolfish grin and tattoos snaking like lies, Jake claimed just passing through, crashing on couches till work panned out. Harry mentioned it offhand over tacos at Taqueria del Sol, lime juice dripping casual. Old crew, No big. But Chris saw the flicker. Jake's texts pinging late. Harry's laughs echoing from bar hangs that stretched past midnight. Jealousy coiled low in Chris's gut, a serpent he'd thought slain. He scrolled Jake's Insta in the dead of night. Harry's snores a counterpoint, shots of them in dive bars, arms slung easy, captions winking reunited, and it feels so good. The album mocked from the nightstand, his truths now suspect. Confrontation brewed over breakfast, avocado toast crumbling under Chris's fork. What's with the ghost from your past? Harry paused, coffee mug midway, eyes narrowing. Jealous. The word landed barbed, Harry's defensiveness a shield. He's a mate, Chris. Not everything's a threat. But threats lurked. Jake's help at the shop turning proprietary. Hands lingering on tools Harry favored. Invites to Chris ignored. Jake's charm a velvet glove over steel. One sweltering Friday, Chris swung by unannounced. Bell tinkling over oil-scented air. And froze Jake and Harry under a hood. Shoulders brushing. Jake's laugh low and intimate. "Babe," Harry greeted, wiping hands on rag. But the air thickened. Jake's gaze appraising like a jeweler's loupe. Dinner that night was strained. Harry's apologies tasting of deflection. "It's nothing." "Swear." Chris nodded. But sleep evaded. Dreams of cropped photos where Harry's face blurred to Jake's. August brought the storm, literal and lit. Thunderstorms lashing the city. Outright's opening gala a whirlwind of bow ties and burlesque. Chris's posters adorned the venue, a converted warehouse in West Midtown throbbing with bass and bodies. Harry showed scrubbed up, buttoned down hugging his frame, arm possessive around Chris's waist as they navigated the crowd. Authors hawking chapbooks, drag MCs roasting the elite. Jake crashed it uninvited, weaving through with beers in hand. His surprise, slurring toward Needy. Harry tensed, but accepted the drink. Their trio awkward not amid the revelry. The climax cracked open in the green room. Post-reading, Chris on a panel discussing queer narratives. Voice raw on Erasure's toll. Applause thundering like rain on tin. Backstage, he caught them. Harry and Jake in a shadowed corner. Jake's hand on Harry's neck. Pull too familiar. Lips hovering a breath from betrayal. Time fractured. Chris's shout a thunderclap. "What the fuck?" Heads turned. But he didn't care. Storming forward. Album clutched like a weapon from his messenger bag. Jake smirked, backing off with a whoops. Interrupted. But Harry's face drained white, guilt etching lines. The drive home was apocalypse. Tires hydroplaning on flooded streets. Chris's accusations a torrent. "You said nothing, but this." Harry gripped the dash, voice breaking over wiper slap. It was a moment old habits. Stupid. I stopped it, but doubt drowned reason. Chris pulling over at a shuttered Krispy Kreme. Engine idling like a heartbeat. Habits? Or regrets? The album slapped between them, pages fanning to their Savannah shot. This was us. Real. Or was I just the rebound frame? Harry's confession spilled then. Raw as road rash. Jake's texts dredging insecurities. Whispers of what if we hadn't crashed. Temptations born of nostalgia's haze. But I chose you, he pleaded, hand reaching. Chris recoiled, tears hot on cheeks. Chose? Or settled? The fight fractured further, words like shrapnel. Harry's I love you landing amid your everything. Chris's prove it a gauntlet. They parted at dawn. Harry to the shop couch. Chris to the loft's cold expanse. album open on the bed like a crime scene. Days blurred to sepia. Harry's texts apologetic avalanches. Chris's replies curt as telegrams. Work buffered. Outright reviews praising his vulnerability. But irony bit deep. Tom called midweek. Oblivious. Reunion planning. You in. Chris's laugh was hollow. Family's a trip. Ha! The irony anchored him, prompting a reckless reach. He invited Harry to therapy. A couple session at a Midtown center run by a no-nonsense dyke with a clipboard and zero bullshit. Harry showed, wary as a stray, but stayed through the hour, tears carving paths, Harry's hand finding Chris's across the Kleenex box. Reconciliation was no fairy tale arc, but a stutter step, coffee after, tentative talks at Piedmont Park, ducks quacking judgment-free. Harry ditched Jake, a final text block, the drifter drifting onward to Chattanooga. You're my constant, Harry vowed one dusk, bench creaking under them, album between. Chris nodded, thumbing to a blank page. Then fill it with me. Lovemaking followed in the loft that night. Tentative touches blooming bold. Bodies rediscovering trust's terrain. Harry's whispers mine a mantra against the dark. September's equinox brought balance. The Whittaker reunion, now an annual anchor, unfolded under harvest moon. The backyard a tapestry of tiki torches and tamales. Kin arrived evolved, cousins out and proud. Marlene's cobbler laced with bourbon confessions. The album, now a shared heirloom, circulated like scripture, new entries from all. Tom's wedding redo with Chris as best man, ink fresh. Harry manned the grill with Ray, their laughter a duet, while Chris and Tom shot the shit on the porch, beers sweating solidarity. As fireflies danced, Chris pulled Harry aside, the oaks shadow their confessional. Almost lost this, he murmured, hand on heart. Harry's kiss was answer enough, deep, devouring, the family a distant hum. They emerged hand in hand, the photo snapped candid, two men, framed full, love's light undimmed. Autumn wove gold through the city, leaves carpeting sidewalks like scattered confetti from a parade long past. And for Chris and Harry, the season felt like homecoming, a quiet crescendo after tempests. The therapy stuck, weekly check-ins evolving to monthly maintenance. The counselor's office a neutral ground where vulnerabilities aired like laundry, folding neater each time. Harry's shop thrived. The Pride Rap's a hit at Atlanta Pride. Booths mobbed by folks craving custom rebellion on chrome. Chris's zine spawned a series, Uncropped Lives, installments tackling corporate closets and family facades, launches drawing crowds to independent bookstores in little 5 points, readings laced with Q&A that felt like group hugs. But life's plot twists weren't done. December ushered conflict in a velvet glove, an offer for Chris, a junior art director spot at a boutique agency in Brooklyn, salary bump and subway symphonies dangled like keys to reinvention. It's a fresh frame, he pitched to Harry over mulled wine at the brick store pub, fairy lights twinkling collusion. Harry's pint paused mid-sip, foam clinging like hesitation. New York? That's big. The words hung, unspoken away from us. And Chris backpedaled, just thinking, but the seed rooted. Temptation's whisper of solo flights, no Georgia ghosts, no shop grease, just skyline sketches and anonymity. Harry's reaction simmered slow, extra shifts masking unease, texts peppered with miss you tonight. Christmas Eve found them at the farm again. Ellie's absence a soft hollow in the parlor. But the tree glittered defiant, ornaments handmade from album clippings, tiny frames of faded joys. Marlene hosted, her gumbo richer with reconciliation, and as kin swapped gifts, Tom pulled Chris aside, a wrapped box heavy in his palm. "For you too," he said, inside a leather folio, blank pages awaiting their legacy. Harry's eyes misted, pulling Tom into a clapback hug, the brothers by choice sealing bonds. New Year's dawned crisp, Asheville cabin booked as promised, the Blue Ridge a rumpled quilt under snow-dusted peaks. They drove winding roads, radio crooning Dylan, Harry's hand a constant on Chris's gear shift. The cabin was rustic romance, stone fireplace crackling, hot tub steaming under stars like a private galaxy. Over cider by the hearth, the offer surfaced again, Chris's voice tentative. "Brooklyn could be us, bigger canvas." Harry stared into flames, poker silent. "Or it could be you running from them. From me." The accusation stung. Betrayals echo in Harry's fear of abandonment. His trailer park youth a specter of folks who packed and vanished. The fight flared hot, words hurled like logs on the fire. "Chris's you hold me back. Harry's I anchor you. Damn it." They stormed to separate rooms. Cabin walls thin as paper, regrets echoing. Midnight found Chris on the porch. Album open to Ellie's last photo, a bedside Polaroid. Her smile faint but fierce, tears freezing on lashes. Harry joined wordless, blanket draped over shoulders, their huddle a truce. "I almost took it," Chris confessed, voice smoke. "Without you," Harry's exhale was prayer. "Then take me too." Dawn's negotiation brewed over pancakes. Compromises hashed. Remote freelance for Chris. Harry's shop franchising potential. Brooklyn faded to a maybe. Atlanta's pull magnetic. Spring 2026 bloomed buoyant. Cherry blossoms powdering the beltline like confectioner's sugar. Their life a collage of commitments. Chris turned down the offer, countering with a local collab graphic lead for a queer film fest. Storyboarding tales of love's long shots. Harry proposed expansion, scouting a satellite shop in Decatur, Chris mock-drawing logos over diner sketches. The album swelled, a spread from Asheville, tub steam blurring their embrace. Tom's kids' crayon scribble of Uncle Quist and Hawaii glued crooked. Climax crested in June, the annual reunion now uncropped gathering. Backyard expanded to meadow, tents shading 100 souls, Whitaker's blood and chosen, potlucks mingling collards and falafel. Rayam seed, binder now digital slideshow projected on a bedsheet. Stories syncing with Cricket's chorus. Marlene, softened to anti-warmth, cornered Chris with a quilt, stitched from Ellie's fabrics, patches embroidered with album motifs. "For your nest," she said, eyes bright. Tom toasted mid-meal, arm around his wife, to frames that fit us all, but the night's peak pulsed personal. As bonfire roared, Harry tugged Chris to the oak. The time capsule unearthed years back now refilled, letters to futures, photos sealed in wax. Kneeling in dew-kissed grass, Harry pulled a ring from pocket, simple tungsten band, etched with a compass rose matching Chris's tat. "Marry me," he rasped, not question but vow. Not in spite of the mess, but with it. Chris's yes shattered the quiet. Whoops erupting from shadows, kin emerging, phones flashing full-frame joy. Kisses sealed it under fireworks. Harry's arms a harbor, love's drama yielding to romance's glow. The wedding wove summer's end, a backyard affair at the farm. August heat tempered by fans and ferns, Aisle of wildflowers trampled by barefoot guests. Chris in linen suit, sleeves rolled to ink. Harry in vest and jeans, grin splitting his face. Vows traded album style. Chris reading from a page of their Savannah shot. You uncropped my world. Harry from a fresh print. I'll frame every tomorrow. Rings exchanged to Springsteen's Thunder Road. The kiss a thunderclap. Cheers cascading like rain. Fall circled back. Now laced with permanence. Rings glinting in shop lights. On design desks. In therapy high-fives. Conflict scars faded to stories. Betrayals lessons the glue. One crisp October eve. Post-dinner walk in Pie Edmont. Album under arm. Chris paused at the dog park. Pups romping free. Think we'd have made it without the cuts? Harry laced fingers. Ring cool against skin. Nah. The erasures made us etch deeper. Humanistic close. No tidy bows, but a tapestry. Flawed kin mending. Love persistent as kudzu. They returned home. Loft aglow. Album open to the wedding spread. Candids of tears and toasts. Marlene's quilt draped couchback. In bed. Bodies entwined eternal. Harry's breath on neck a lullaby. Our album. Endless edition. Chris smiled into dark. Whole at last. Uncropped. Unbreakable.